Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into something shinier than a magpie's Pinterest board and messier than your cousin's third divorce, Victorian gin palaces. Yes, the glittering, gaslit chaos factories where Victorians went to do the one thing they truly excelled at. Drink gin and ignore their problems. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. But let's pause for a second. What it was like to sip cheap gin out of a greasy glass while standing in a bar so shiny it looked like Liberace's bathroom. Did gin really make Victorian women faint in public, or were corsets just doing all the work? How many drinks did it take before you started crying over your lost shoelace? What's it like to socialize in a palace with chandeliers but no plumbing? And did anyone actually enjoy the gin? Or was it just poison with a lime? Well, tonight, you're going to find out. Because congratulations, you've just woken up in 1852, in the heart of London. Your shoes are missing, your pockets are empty, and you're staring into a mirror ceiling, wondering if that's your face or just the gin talking. Welcome to the Gin Palace. As you step inside the Gin Palace, you're greeted by enough gaslight to light up a football stadium and enough mirrored surfaces to make you question whether you've fallen into a funhouse or a fever dream. The air smells of cheap perfume, damp wool, and something faintly lemony which might be cleaning fluid or someone's gin-flavored breath. Your boots immediately make a faint squelching sound as they meet the floor, sticky, suspicious, and untrustworthy. Like a handshake from a Victorian politician, you try not to think about what you're standing in. You try even harder not to fall over in it. The floor tiles are ornate, but you can only glimpse them between puddles of spilled gin and lost hopes. Every surface is polished, gleaming, and screaming for attention like a drunk actor at a wedding. There are mirrored columns, mirrored ceilings, mirrored panels. If you had any insecurities about your outfit, posture, or jawline, too bad. You'll be seeing them from every possible angle for the next several hours. The gaslights hiss softly above your head, bathing everything in a warm golden glow that somehow makes the chaos feel theatrical, like you've stepped onto a stage production titled Drunk in Velvet, a tragedy in 3 acts. The chandeliers overhead sparkle with the kind of confidence only a room full of slightly flammable alcohol can muster. You take a moment to adjust to the overwhelming brightness. Victorians weren't subtle. They liked their interiors the way they liked their gin. Excessive, volatile, and liable to catch fire. The lighting is so aggressive it could interrogate you. And it does. Silently, as you edge past a man asleep in his own beard on a velvet bench. Voices crash together like a drunk choir, some shouting over games of dominoes, others giggling into their gloves. The accents are thick, the laughter contagious, and the occasional scream somehow festive. It's hard to tell whether someone is celebrating, proposing marriage, or being robbed. A waiter glides past you carrying a silver tray stacked with glasses of gin, so full they defy the laws of physics. He doesn't spill a drop. It's sorcery, or trauma-trained reflexes. He's wearing a waistcoat so tight he may be unable to breathe, which is probably for the best. Breathing in this place is a full-contact sport. You find a corner near one of the etched glass panels, frosted with swirling patterns, occasionally interrupted by someone's face smooshed against it in a moment of dramatic inebriation. It's not privacy, but it's the closest thing to it in a room full of people who consider whispering a sign of weakness. Somewhere behind you, a woman is laughing so hard she's hiccuping. A man nearby is trying to impress her with a story about fighting off 3 rats and a chimney sweep. No one is sure if it's a metaphor, possibly not even him. The longer you stay, the more it feels like time has lost all meaning. There are no clocks here. Only gin refills and increasingly poor decisions. The palace doesn't want you to know what hour it island. It wants you to forget your responsibilities, your curfew, and possibly your name. Every detail of the room screams luxury. but Victorian luxury, which means everything looks beautiful until you touch it. That golden trim, paint, the marble counter, veneer, the velvet cushions, damp. It's all illusion, held together by pride, gaslight, and enough alcohol to kill a moose. And yet it's mesmerizing. You understand now why people come here in droves, to drink, to dream, to escape, to pretend, for a few hours, that they're somewhere grander than their boarding house, somewhere cleaner than the slums, somewhere shinier than their real life. It's a palace built on gin and denial. And you've just been welcomed in. It's Friday night, and the gin palace is bursting at the seams. There's shouting, laughter, crying, sometimes all from the same person. You can't hear your own thoughts over the sound of someone arguing with a potted plant. Ah, yes. A perfectly ordinary evening in Victorian London. The energy in the room crackles like static on a wool sweater. People are packed wall to wall, jostling each other like drunk sardines in formal wear. There's no such thing as personal space. It's a communal concept here, like gout or collective delusion. You sidestep a man waltzing with what appears to be a mop, and no one bats an eye. A trio of factory workers are singing something off-key and probably illegal, while a woman in a feathered hat loudly critiques someone's sideburns from across the room. You try to follow the conversation, but it's like eavesdropping on a seagull argument. Passionate, unintelligible, and occasionally punctuated by squawking. Gin palaces don't do quiet corners. Even the darkest booths buzz with energy. Someone's always proposing marriage, performing an interpretive dance, or reciting poetry that started romantic but ended with a threat against the Prussian government. There are no rules here, just vibes, and maybe a few mild stabbings. You inch toward what you hope is a calmer section, only to discover a full-blown card game happening on the floor. The players range from an old woman with 3 teeth to a teenage chimney sweep who swears in 5 languages and may be winning by sheer intimidation. They invite you to play. You decline with a polite nod and a vague excuse about needing to feed your imaginary ferret. Near the bar, a group is engaged in something between a debate and a drinking contest. The topic is unclear. The volume is not. One man claims gin was invented by monks. Another insists it came from the devil. Both might be right. The bartender doesn't intervene. He's polishing glasses with the calm detachment of someone who has emotionally left the building. A sudden cheer erupts from the far end of the room. Someone has climbed onto a chair and is balancing a gin glass on their forehead. It's impressive. It's also the 3rd time they've tried it tonight. The first ended in minor injury. The second in unexpected applause. This one ends in a group hug and a spilled drink. No one minds. Everyone claps. A random dog barks in approval. There's a man standing in the corner preaching about the dangers of gin. He's holding a Bible in one hand and a drink in the other. His message is confusing, but his commitment is admirable. Someone hands him a pork pie, and he accepts it like a sacred offering. You wonder if you've joined a cult, but decide you're probably too sober for that level of clarity. A couple near you is arguing about whether to get married or just run off to Brighton and open a hat shop. They're both slurring. Neither owns a hat. You pretend to be fascinated by the wallpaper until they forget you exist. It's hot, it's loud, it smells like perfume, sweat, pickles, and burnt optimism. You've never been more awake or more confused. This is nightlife, Victorian style, where no one goes out to relax. They go out to escape, to perform, to shout their feelings into a cloud of gin vapor and questionable decisions. There's no Spotify playlist, just fiddles, stomping feet, and the distant sound of someone getting very emotional about a lost glove. And as the night wears on and the crowd grows rowdier, you realize something important. You're no longer a bystander. You're part of the chaos now. This is not the artisanal, cucumber-infused botanical nonsense you're used to. This is Victorian gin, also known as mother's ruin, or, depending on the batch, temporary blindness in a bottle. It's clear, cheap, and tastes like regret. You bring the glass to your lips and immediately question every decision that's led you to this moment. The gin is sharp, bitter, and strangely oily, as if someone filtered it through a sock full of resentment. It doesn't so much glide over the tongue as it attacks it, leaving behind a faint aftertaste of soap, despair, and possibly turnips. But this was the standard. In 1850s London, gin wasn't served to be savoured. It was served to do a job. Dull the senses, quiet the stomach, erase your memory of how many rats you saw that morning. It was cheap, much cheaper than beer, and thanks to various loopholes, it could be legally sold by almost anyone with a cupboard and a grudge, and it was sold by everyone. Housewives brewed it in bathtubs. Street vendors sold it by the ladle from buckets. Apothecaries handed it out with vague promises of medicinal relief, which is Victorian for shut up and drink. The result was a wide variety of flavours, all of them bad, and some of them actively dangerous. One popular method of distillation involved turpentine, which gave the gin a signature pine-fresh aroma. Not in the way that's comforting. In the way that makes you wonder if you've just poisoned your liver and your dignity at the same time. Other batches included sulfuric acid, which helped clarify the liquid and also your understanding of the word suffering. There were no regulations, no ingredient lists, and no warning labels. If you asked what was in your gin, you'd either get a laugh or a new nickname, like Fancy Questions McGee. The rule was simple. If it didn't burn a hole in your throat, it was probably safe. Probably, you sip again bravely. It hits your stomach like a punch from a drunk poltergeist. The warmth spreads fast, but not in a soothing way. More like a chemical fire spreading across your internal organs. You feel flush, confused, and vaguely musical. Around you, others drink like it's oxygen. A woman to your left downs her gin in a single motion, wipes her mouth with the back of her glove, and immediately begins telling a story about how she once chased a goose across Blackfriars Bridge. A man nearby is slumped over the bar, cradling his empty glass like it's a long-lost lover. You're not sure if he's asleep or emotionally ruined, possibly both. Some people drank gin for fun. Most drank it for necessity. It dulled hunger. It soothed cold limbs. It softened the horror of a life lived ankle-deep in coal dust and unpaid bills. For many, it was breakfast. For others, it was bedtime. For some, it was both, with no real break in between. But even in its terribleness, gin had its rituals. The clink of glasses, the exaggerated toasts, the dramatic coughing fits that followed the first sip. You were expected to grimace. It meant the gin was working. In the corner, someone's pouring a round of blue ruin, the affectionate nickname for particularly aggressive batches. It's called that because, historically, it destroyed both your mood and your internal organs, and occasionally dyed your teeth a concerning shade of cobalt. You politely decline. You'd like to retain at least 2 senses by morning, and yet after a few gulps, you feel it. The soft fuzziness behind your eyes, the loosening of your tongue, the creeping sense that maybe this place isn't so bad and maybe that man is winking at you and not just blinking unevenly. This gin is not good. It is not nice. It is barely legal, but it's doing exactly what it promised. And in Victorian London, that was more than most things. You're surrounded by mahogany panels, etched glass, chandeliers, and enough gold paint to fool you into thinking you're in a royal ballroom. But you're not. You're in a bar where someone just tried to trade their coat for half a sausage roll. From floor to ceiling, the gin palace is dripping with the kind of over-the-top opulence that makes you wonder whether you're here to drink gin or marry into a minor European royal family. There are elaborate cornices, velvet curtains, and gas lamps shaped like cherubs, because nothing says have another drink like glowing baby angels silently judging your life choices. At first glance, everything looks expensive. At second glance, everything still looks expensive. But now you notice that the gold is flaking off the woodwork, the velvet is threadbare in suspicious places, and that magnificent marble column in the corner is, in fact, just plaster with ambition. You sit on a bench, upholstered in something once described as brocade, now more accurately called slightly damp regret. It squelches slightly beneath you, and you tell yourself it's just condensation. It's not. It's never just condensation. Still, you can't help but admire the audacity. The Victorians didn't build gin palaces to be subtle. These places were supposed to dazzle the poor, seduce the working class, and temporarily convince everyone inside that they were living a more glamorous life than the one that involved coal dust, coughing, and eating bread soaked in gravy for every meal. The etched glass panels are everywhere, frosted, floral, swirling like a decorative fever dream. They partition off areas of the bar in a way that implies privacy but delivers none. You can hear everything, see most things, and smell all things. The effect is less elegant boudoir and more gaslit fishbowl. And then there are the mirrors, endless mirrors, lining the walls, tucked behind bottles, even embedded in the ceiling. Nothing makes you question your choices like watching yourself from 17 different angles while sipping a beverage that could double as industrial solvent. You glance up and catch your reflection in the overhead dome mirror, red-nosed, sweaty, and surrounded by half-conscious strangers. It's like being the guest of honor at a very chaotic séance. Victorians were obsessed with visual trickery. The idea was simple. If you couldn't afford luxury, just pretend. The chandeliers are massive, dazzling, and hung slightly off-center. One good sneeze and the entire lighting apparatus could come down like an angry crystal meteor. You move slightly to the left. A gentleman beside you points out the carved mahogany panels, proudly informing you that they're made of something called scumbled pine, which is not a wood species, but rather a phrase that means we painted it brown and hoped no one would notice. You nod solemnly, as if this knowledge has improved your life. The bar itself is long, gleaming, and staffed by a bartender who looks like he hasn't blinked in 2 hours. Behind him are shelves stacked with bottles, some ornate, some cloudy, some held together with string and stubbornness. The back wall is mirrored too, multiplying the bottles into a never-ending infinity of temptation. It's beautiful. It's also probably a fire hazard. Even the floor tiles play along with the illusion. Ornate geometric patterns give the illusion of grandeur. But step in the wrong spot and the tile wobbles like it's trying to escape your boot. One square has a crack so wide you're fairly certain it leads directly to the underworld. Or worse, the public toilets. And yet, despite it all, you feel enchanted. The decor, for all its deception, works. You forget for a moment that outside these walls is soot, sewage, and sadness. In here there's gaslight, gold leaf, and the comforting lie that everything is fine. It's not a palace, but it sure knows how to pretend. He's got the patience of a saint, the speed of a caffeinated mongoose, and the subtle contempt of a man who has seen far too much. You ask for a gin, and he hands it to you with a look that says, "You'll be back in 20 seconds." Crying. He is the unspoken ruler of the gin palace, the quiet force of stability in a sea of collapsing dignity and overconfident moustaches. He doesn't shout. He doesn't smile. He simply exists, moving between customers with the fluidity of a cat burglar and the dead eyes of someone who once watched a man attempt to pay for a drink with a live eel. Dressed in a crisp waistcoat that somehow remains unstained in the middle of a liquid battlefield, he moves like clockwork. One hand paws, the other wipes. A third appears out of nowhere to catch a falling glass mid-air. He's part bartender, part stage magician, and part emotional support animal for a room full of gin-soaked Victorians. He never asks your name. He doesn't need to. He knows who you are. You're customer number 198 tonight. You're on your third drink, your fourth bad decision, and your voice is starting to wobble. He saw it coming the second you walked in and tried to tip your hat to a curtain. Behind the bar, he operates in organized chaos. The shelves are stacked with bottles, some dusty, some glowing, one suspiciously warm, and he knows every single one by heart. Not by label, mind you. Most aren't labeled. Some are just marked with a skull, a number, or the words "probably fine." Still, he knows what's inside them, and what they'll do to the poor soul who orders them. Someone tries to flirt with him. A regular, by the sound of it. She calls him darling. He responds by refilling her drink without breaking eye contact, which in bartender language means, "Not in this lifetime, Eleanor." You watch as he handles 3 orders, breaks up an argument about horse racing, and somehow counsels a sobbing dock worker whose wife just ran off with a bread delivery boy. He says nothing profound, just grunts, nods, and throws in a free pickle. Sometimes that's enough. He's not just a gin slinger. He's a confessor, a referee, a translator of slurred nonsense. He knows who's about to fight, who's about to cry, and who's about to vomit behind the curtain. Again. And he handles all of it without blinking. He's heard every story, every excuse, every variation of "one more drink, I swear." He knows the signs. The twitchy hands. The glassy eyes. The slightly too loud declaration that everything is completely under control. He doesn't judge, not openly. But his eyebrow does most of the heavy lifting. You try to strike up a conversation. He nods once, says, and slides a bowl of peanuts toward you with such finality that you understand you will be getting no further tonight. You respect that. You eat the peanuts. He works long into the night, polishing glasses that are already clean and wiping counters that will never be. The bar could be burning down around him, and he'd calmly garnish someone's gin with a twist of lemon before even considering an exit. And yet, for all his gruffness, people trust him. They tell him secrets. They confess crimes. One man claimed to have invented a new type of spoon. The barkeeper just nodded and poured him another. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't comfort. But he listens, and in a place where nothing is solid, except bad decisions and sticky floors, that counts for something. He is not your friend. He's more important than that. He's the bartender. Women in Victorian gin palaces weren't just side characters. They were full participants, some out drinking the men, others fainting dramatically into the arms of strangers. Corsets didn't stop them. They just added dramatic flair to public intoxication. Forget the dainty image of a Victorian woman sipping tea in a sunlit parlor. These women are elbow-deep in a gin-soaked night out, navigating mirrored chaos in button-up boots and social expectations so rigid they might as well be cast iron. Inside the palace, the usual rules fade like the edges of a fever dream. Manners are optional, volume is encouraged, and respectability has long since stumbled out the back door and into a horse trough. You watch as a woman in a feathered bonnet slams her glass on the bar and yells for another round like she's summoning spirits, or possibly challenging them to a duel. Beside her, a younger woman is giggling uncontrollably into her glove, whispering scandalous observations about the mustache of the man 2 stools down. He pretends not to hear. He absolutely hears. Ladies come here for the same reasons as men: to drink, to escape, and to experience temporary freedom from the suffocating etiquette of polite society. Out there, they're wives, servants, spinsters, governesses. In here, they're chaos in a bonnet. They flirt, they gamble. One of them appears to be trying to sell hairpins as weapons. It's unclear if she's joking, and make no mistake, these women can drink. 1 minute, you're sipping your gin slowly, trying to avoid coughing too dramatically. The next, a woman twice your age is ordering a triple, downing it in one smooth motion, and calling you sweetheart like she's about to tuck you in and steal your wallet. There's something rebellious about their presence. In a world where female behavior is scrutinized down to how loudly one chews toast, the gin palace is a stage for dramatic exits, slurred monologues, and unsolicited relationship advice. One woman begins singing a love ballad to her own reflection in the etched glass wall. A small crowd gathers. She gets a standing ovation and a free drink. Corsets, far from being a hindrance, become part of the performance. Every swoon is more theatrical. Every hiccup becomes a gasp. When a woman faints into the arms of a chimney sweep, you wonder briefly if it's real or just an advanced form of flirting. Either way, the sweep looks thrilled, but there's more to it than drama. The Gin Palace gives women a rare space to exist loudly, to laugh too hard, to argue about nonsense, to sit unaccompanied and drink something that could theoretically strip paint. For many, it's the only time in the week or the year they can speak their mind without immediate consequences, unless someone throws a pickle, which happens more than you'd expect. You overhear a group of women debating the merits of various elopement strategies. One suggests jumping on a coal barge. Another recommends pretending to be a ghost. You nod thoughtfully, taking mental notes, just in case. Not all the women here are poor, either. Some are dressed finely, with silk gloves and jewelry that hasn't been pawned yet. They sit in booths, sipping slowly, eyes sharp. You get the sense they're gathering stories, or maybe plotting something involving a large sum of money and a missing husband. The night wears on. One woman dances alone near the entrance, swirling her skirts like she's the star of a tragic opera. Another woman gives a toast to freedom, folly, and mildly poisoned gin before nearly falling into the punch bowl. Everyone claps, and as you watch them, stumbling, laughing, occasionally crying into their lace, you realize these women aren't just surviving the Victorian world. They're subverting it, one reckless sip at a time. If you're wearing one, congratulations. You're now sitting perfectly upright, unable to bend at the waist, and wondering why someone thought this was a good idea. Drinking gin in a corset is like playing Jenga with your organs. At first, it feels manageable. Restrictive, sure, but manageable. You think, how bad could it be? It's just a little Victorian shapewear. 10 minutes later, you realize your spleen has relocated to your shoulder, your ribs are plotting an escape, and your lungs have been reduced to decorative items. Breathing is now a suggestion. Burping? A full-body crisis. Corsets were designed to give you the ideal silhouette, the coveted hourglass shape, with a waist so small it could be mistaken for a design flaw. And while you look fabulous, like someone who might have very fancy opinions about embroidery, your insides are crying, loudly. In Morse code, you just can't hear them over the gaslights and the screaming violinist in the corner. The problem, of course, is that gin requires space. Emotional space, yes, but also literal, stomach and diaphragm kind of space. And corsets deny that. So each sip feels like you're trying to pour soup into a closed suitcase. Nothing lands where it should. Your body is a tightly wound mystery box, and you just added flammable liquid to it. You shift in your seat and hear a faint pop, either a bone or a button, you're not sure. Everyone around you carries on as if nothing happened. Probably because they've all heard it before. Corset casualties are normal here. A fainting spell every half hour is basically the price of entry. A woman 3 booths over has fully passed out into her bread pudding, and no one's even stopped chewing. The bartender glances your way. He sees the sheen of panic on your forehead and knows exactly what's happening. He nods once, solemnly, and pours you a shorter drink. It's a mercy gin. Blessedly less volume, slightly less danger. You raise it in salute, but you can't actually raise your arm above shoulder height. The corset says no. You attempt to laugh at a joke someone nearby tells, but it comes out as a squeak. Laughter takes airflow. Airflow requires rib expansion. Rib expansion is forbidden. Your lungs are more decoration now than utility. You settle for a polite wheeze and a pained smile. Still, you try to enjoy yourself. You are, after all, part of the glittering gin palace crowd. You look good. Your waist is impressively wasp-like. You just wish your internal organs would stop vibrating like a piano dropped down a staircase. Nearby, another corset wearer discreetly loosens a lace under the table. It's the Victorian version of taking off your bra in the car. You nod at her. A secret moment of solidarity. A silent alliance formed between women and their shared enemy of fashion. But corsets aren't just for women. Oh no, men wear them too, though theirs are more subtle. More don't ask than look at me. Some are built into waistcoats, others are simply layers of tight tailoring designed to squeeze the torso into submission. You spot a gentleman across the room who looks like he might burst if he laughs too hard. His forehead is shiny with effort. He coughs once and immediately excuses himself to go check on the horses, which is code for lie down behind the gin barrels and scream. Despite the pain, the discomfort, the internal rearrangement, there's a strange pride in enduring it. To suffer so glamorously, to look like high society while feeling like a dropped accordion. You sip your gin carefully now, eyes watering, spine locked in a proud and slightly trembling arc. Because you're not just drinking in Victorian London, you're drinking through it. One compressed organ at a time. There are chandeliers. There are etched glass partitions. There are no toilets. If you're lucky, there's a shared outhouse out back, and a bucket someone's named Sir Chamberpot III. Don't ask what happened to the first two. Victorian gin palaces weren't designed with biological needs in mind. They were temples of indulgence, opulence, and public intoxication. But when it came time to process all that gin, things took a hard turn toward medieval. You gaze around the richly decorated room and notice something missing. Plumbing. Indoor plumbing. Any plumbing. The kind of plumbing that ensures you don't have to make life-altering decisions in the middle of a social event. You ask the barkeeper where the facilities are. He blinks slowly, then gestures vaguely toward the back exit, where an ominous door marked private swings lazily in the breeze. Beyond that door lies a grim courtyard of broken crates, cats with opinions, and, if the rumors are true, the communal outhouse. You find it. Technically, it's a small, sad shed with a crescent moon carved into the door, because nothing says hygiene like a whimsical symbol. Inside, there's a wooden bench with a hole, a smell that could peel paint, and a pile of hay that seems to serve no particular purpose but exists in a menacing, damp heap. You sit down, immediately regret it, stand back up, regret that too. If it's raining, the outhouse leaks. If it's cold, everything is frozen. If it's warm, the smell becomes sentient. You try not to breathe, but breathing is kind of important when you're sobering up in a freezing wooden box that may or may not contain rats, ghosts, or both. And here's the kicker. This is the high-end solution. Most gin palaces didn't even have an outhouse. Some just had alleys, or buckets, or a vague policy of figure it out and try not to be seen. The back corners of the palace, especially near the cloakroom, had a suspicious smell and a history best left unexplored. Sometimes, a patron would bravely declare they were off to the garden, which was code for to relieve oneself in a way that violates both dignity and basic urban planning. If you had enough money or social clout, you could bribe a servant to let you use the staff chamber pot. If not, well, welcome to the alley of shame. You consider your options, and remember you're wearing a corset. Excellent. What was already a logistical nightmare is now a full-body puzzle involving laces, modesty, and balance. Unbuckling anything feels like defusing a bomb. One wrong move, and your evening could turn into a public scandal or a folk song. Some patrons don't even bother leaving their seats. They simply make arrangements. A cough, a shuffle, a discreet bucket beneath the table. You pretend not to notice. Everyone pretends. That's the social contract of gin palaces. Indulge freely, ignore absolutely everything, and don't ask about the staff. The poor bartenders and cleaners had the unenviable job of managing the aftermath. At closing time, they'd find things best categorized as biohazards and others that might qualify as cryptids. One barmaid once claimed she found a live eel in a boot. No one questioned her. They were just impressed the boot had survived. So next time you're in a modern pub and someone complains about the hand dryer being too loud, spare a thought for your Victorian counterpart, hovering over a wooden seat in a moonlit shed, surrounded by cats, wondering if the echo she just heard was her imagination or an actual ghost named Barry. Because in the gin palace, luxury ended at the velvet drapes. Everything past that was a test of character and bladder control. You ask for food and are handed something called pork scratchings that may, or may not, contain actual pork. The Victorian idea of a bar snack is anything salty enough to make you buy more gin or crunchy enough to break a molar. There is no menu, there is no choice. There is only the snack bowl, an ominous object placed on the bar like a dare. Its contents shimmer slightly under the gaslight, not because they're fresh, but because they've been handled by so many hands that the grease now has a reflective quality. You stare at the scratchings, unsure if they are food, bait, or discarded upholstery. They're dry, jagged, and somehow both brittle and chewy, like chewing through old boot leather that's been left on a radiator. One bite and you feel a tooth shift. That's your snack telling you it's winning. You look around. Other patrons seem unfazed. One woman is popping them into her mouth like popcorn, eyes gleaming with the reckless hunger of someone who's fought raccoons for bread crusts. A man nearby is eating them with a small knife, which you first think is for etiquette, but later realize is just the only way to avoid dental surgery. On rare occasions, the scratchings are joined by a second snack, pickled eggs. They sit in a cloudy jar on the bar, looming like the preserved regrets of gin drinkers past. No one knows when the eggs were pickled. No one asks. The jar is sealed with wax, hope, and the kind of silence usually reserved for haunted objects. You briefly consider ordering one until a man does so beside you. The barkeeper retrieves the egg with iron tongs and places it onto a cracked saucer. The man bites into it, pauses, and says, "Huh, spicy." Everyone claps. You decide you're not brave enough for fermented protein roulette. Other snack options include stale breadsticks that might once have been weapons, roasted peas if you enjoy chewing gravel, and something ominously called devil's toast, which appears to be bread soaked in gin and then crisped over an open flame. It's simultaneously soggy and burnt, an impressive culinary contradiction. The guiding principle of Victorian bar food is simple. Salt and crunch. Salt to make you thirstier. Crunch to prove you're still conscious. Taste is optional. Texture is a threat. Sometimes someone brings in their own food. A woman once produced a full meat pie from her handbag. No one stopped her. She offered slices to strangers like a benevolent meat fairy. The barkeeper watched but said nothing. Either he respected the move or feared her deeply. Possibly both. You do manage to find a single appealing option. A small bowl of roasted chestnuts. Warm. Nutty. Almost pleasant, until you realize they were roasted 4 hours ago, and now resemble marbles with dreams of becoming bricks. You crack one open, chip a nail, and accept defeat. Somehow, despite all logic and dental warnings, the snacks keep disappearing. Patrons munch away like goats in top hats. Perhaps the gin dulls the senses. Perhaps, in a world where life is hard and toilets are hypothetical, a crunchy, vaguely meat-flavored object is enough to count as a treat, but most likely, it's just tradition. If your great-grandfather cracked a tooth on a pork scratching and called it a fine evening, then by Victorian logic, so will you. You push the bowl away, pat your stomach, and pretend to be full. In truth, you're mostly full of confusion, questionable protein, and mild digestive anxiety. And yet, as the gin palace swirls around you in mirrored madness, there's something oddly comforting about it all. Even if the snack might be pork, or might be plaster, the table to your left is fighting about stolen laundry. The one to your right is plotting a very poorly planned elopement. Across the room, someone is monologuing to a taxidermy owl. Every corner holds a sitcom episode waiting to happen. Gin palaces, for all their etched glass and gold paint, were not places of quiet refinement. They were Victorian society's messy living room, where secrets got spilled faster than drinks, and everyone forgot they had indoor voices. The gaslights may be dim, but the drama burns brighter than a bonfire made of unpaid debts and unresolved tension. You try not to stare. You fail. The laundry fight escalates. It turns out it wasn't just a pair of bloomers. It was the bloomers. The expensive ones with the embroidered hem, stolen allegedly by a neighbor's cousin's fiancé during a game of dice and flirtation. The details are murky, as they always are when gin and pride are involved. But the phrase ungrateful undergarment thief is shouted loud enough to turn heads. A bartender winces, a rat retreats. Meanwhile, on your right, the eloping couple whispers with the subtlety of a steam engine in a church. They've packed bread, one boot between them, and no idea how geography works. Their plan involves heading southwestish until they find a minister who's both blind and forgetful. One of them wants to bring their dog. The other insists the dog is too judgmental. You quietly take bets with yourself on how far they'll make it before realizing they've just walked in a circle around the same pub. A few tables over, the owl confessor is still going strong. He's now apologizing to the owl for something that happened during the incident at Bethnal Green. You don't know what the incident was. You don't want to know. But the owl does. The owl remembers. In the corner, a group of chimney sweeps is playing cards with a suspiciously clean man who claims he's just passing through. You get the feeling he's passing through a lot of money right now. One of the sweeps accuses him of cheating using his monocle. A brawl nearly breaks out until someone offers pickled onions as a peace offering. The onions are accepted. The tension remains. At the far end of the room, a well-dressed woman stands up and declares that her husband's moustache is a lie and a betrayal. The husband looks shocked, not by the accusation, but because someone else yells, "Here, here," and throws a bread crust in solidarity. Within seconds, the room devolves into an impromptu debate about facial hair, betrayal, and whether or not mustache wax is witchcraft. A man with sideburns storms out. Everywhere you turn, the palace hums with gossip, confessions, and the occasional toast to Queen Victoria, delivered by someone definitely not invited to speak publicly. One woman loudly announces she's joining the circus. Her friend insists she is the circus. A man in a cravat shouts that he's invented a new form of soap. Someone else accuses him of theft. He denies it. Badly, the bartender doesn't intervene. He's seen worse. This, he knows, is just Tuesday. You try to zone out, but it's impossible. Every snippet you overhear is more outrageous than the last. She said it was gravy, but it bit me. He kissed my hand and my pie. In that order. If my aunt hears about this, she'll disown me. Again. It's a verbal tornado. A conversational flood. A non-stop, 360-degree drama performance, fueled entirely by alcohol, poor boundaries, and the deep Victorian fear of boredom. And it's impossible not to love. You sip your gin, lean back slightly, as much as the corset allows, and let the cacophony wash over you. You don't need to speak, you just need to listen. Because in this palace, the real entertainment isn't the decor, or the drinks, or even the occasional interpretive fainting. It's the endless, ridiculous, deeply human noise of other people's lives. A man with a banjo and 3 missing teeth is belting out what might be a sea shanty, or possibly a deeply personal rant about sandwiches. Either way, It's loud, emotional, and dangerously close to interpretive dance. Victorian Gin Palace entertainment sits somewhere between unexpected delight and voluntary auditory trauma. You never know what you're going to get, just that it will be unfiltered, untrained, and delivered at a volume that suggests the performer assumes you're partially deaf and fully emotionally available. Tonight's main act is the Banjo Man. His name might be Toby, or maybe it's Banjo Dave. No one's quite sure. What is clear is that he has taken the stage, a space loosely defined as any elevated surface not currently occupied by spilled drinks or unconscious patrons. He stands atop a crate, eyes wild, strumming with the energy of a caffeinated goat. He sings of betrayal. He sings of bread. He sings, at one point, directly to the chandelier. The crowd is loving it. Or maybe they're just too drunk to be afraid. Either way, they clap along in violently inconsistent rhythm. A few stomp their boots in time. One woman throws a pickle in the air like it's confetti. It's unclear whether it's celebratory or threatening, possibly both. As the song builds, the lyrics become less coherent and more interpretive. You catch fragments like, "Sandwich thief, I see your lies. My boots don't fit, but my dreams still do. Never trust a man with 3 onions. Is it poetry? Is it therapy? Is it a cry for help in musical form?" You don't know, but you respect the passion. And the fact that, despite the missing teeth and probable gin-fueled hallucinations, he hits some impressively high notes. Painfully high. Shatter a wine glass high. When he finishes, the room erupts into applause. Well, staggered, slightly confused applause, but applause nonetheless. He bows dramatically, nearly falls off the crate, then shouts "Encore!" at himself and launches into a second song without invitation. This one appears to be a romantic ballad dedicated to his own hat. Banjo Dave is not alone in his quest for noise. A woman with a washboard joins in, providing backup percussion and the occasional shriek. She doesn't know the song, but she feels it. Her rhythm section is aggressive, like she's trying to scrub away her feelings. The crowd approves. There's also a man with spoons. Because, of course, they're island. He clinks them against his knees, his boots, and at one point, a sleeping patron's head. The patron doesn't stir. It adds a nice metallic texture to the chaos. You try to escape the noise by shifting toward the rear of the palace, only to stumble into a small quartet playing something that might be classical music, if classical music had been raised in a barn and taught to fight bears. The violinist is going rogue, the cellist is asleep, the clarinetist keeps giggling. You retreat. Music in the Gin Palace isn't about skill, it's about volume, feeling, and raw emotional outbursts loosely disguised as performance. And in that sense, it's perfect. No one here is judging pitch or polish. They're here for catharsis, or distraction, or because it's too cold to leave. Occasionally, someone requests a song. This usually backfires. You ask for a ballad, you get a polka. You ask for silence, you get a harmonica duel. The entertainers are not here to please you. They are here to express themselves, loudly, questionably, and with deeply personal lyrics that feel like you're intruding on a diary set to music. As Banjo Dave finishes his final note, something that sounds like a scream but is technically in key, the room bursts into cheers, or groans, or a mix of both. You're not sure anymore. But as the din settles and the next performer climbs onto the crate with a kazoo and suspicious confidence, you realize something. You may not understand Victorian music, but it definitely understands you. He's got a top hat, 2 walking sticks, and no sense of personal space. He claims to be a baron, but also offers to sell you his mustache comb for 6 pence. Something doesn't add up, and it's not just his account of the Crimean War. He introduces himself with a flourish and a bow that nearly takes out a nearby potted fern. He goes by Sir Algenon Basil P. Flanagan, third of his name, and insists you use the full title every time you speak to him. You try once, Never again. Sir Algenon has the air of a man who once saw a nobleman from across the street and decided to base his entire personality on that fleeting silhouette. His top hat is several sizes too tall. His waistcoat has 5 different patterns competing for attention, and both walking sticks appear to be decorative. One has a fox carved into the handle, the other a poorly varnished potato. He doesn't sit so much as pose. He arranges himself like a portrait that's aware of its own importance. One leg outstretched, both hands resting dramatically on his sticks, and a gaze that implies he's either contemplating the mysteries of the universe or struggling to remember your name. You don't ask him anything. You just exist within his orbit, and that's enough. He begins to speak, loudly, about his time in the Crimean War, during which he apparently led a cavalry charge, negotiated peace terms, and invented a new kind of soup, all in the same afternoon. When you ask how old he is, he winks and says, old enough to know better, young enough to dance the quadrille. You regret asking. He pulls a small flask from his coat and offers you a sip. It smells like varnish and despair. You politely decline. He shrugs and takes a swig, then coughs so violently he loses his monocle into someone's bowl of pork scratchings. No one notices. This is not unusual behavior. At some point, he starts trying to sell you things. Not in a pushy way, more like a Victorian QVC segment performed live and slightly drunk. First, the mustache comb, then a pair of cufflinks blessed by the Bishop of Basingstoke. Then, in a quiet moment, what appears to be his left shoe. You begin to suspect he owns nothing. He hasn't tried to barter for gin. People avoid his table until they've had enough drinks to find him funny. Then, suddenly, he's the life of the party. He tells jokes from 1837. He juggles boiled eggs with startling confidence. He challenges a man to a duel using a cocktail umbrella. You can't tell if he's a genius, a lunatic, or both, but you find yourself oddly charmed. He has stories for everything. Ask him about the Queen, and he'll say she once waved at him from a passing carriage. Ask him about his travels, and he'll tell you he fought a duel in Paris over a misunderstood pastry order. Ask him about the walking sticks, and he'll say one is cursed and the other is extremely cursed. By midnight, he's half asleep in his chair, muttering to himself and stroking an invisible cat. The top hat has tilted sideways. One walking stick has been stolen. The other is now being used to prop open the door. He doesn't seem to mind. He just smiles, sighs, and whispers something about how the gin was better in Vienna. You suspect he's never been east of Essex. But for all his theatrics, you can't help but admire him. In a room full of chaos and questionable choices, he stands, sits, as a monument to imagination, resilience, and the sheer human desire to be someone. Even if that someone is entirely fictional and smells faintly of turpentine, and as you watch him snooze under the flickering gaslights, you realize something important. Every gin palace has a Sir Algenon, and somehow it wouldn't feel complete without him. Legend says some palaces had secret gin spouts built into walls, furniture, even statues. You find one behind a mirror, press it, and are promptly drenched in lukewarm gin. Congratulations, you found the party hose. No one warned you about this. There was no sign, no subtle glow, no knowing wink from a local. Just you, slightly tipsy, trying to adjust your cravat in a smoky wall mirror. And then, splat, you've activated Victorian London's most chaotic plumbing innovation. You're soaked. You smell like regret and juniper. A woman nearby claps politely. A man shouts, "Again," and readies a tin cup. You've stumbled onto one of the gin palace's best-kept secrets, the hidden tap system, part status symbol, part practical joke, and entirely unsupervised. In theory, these built-in taps were a marvel of modern-ish engineering. Some palaces, flush with cash and poor judgment, installed actual gin lines behind walls. routing the nectar of forgetfulness from central barrels to discrete access points around the building. Press a knob, pull a lever, tilt the nose of a suspiciously fancy statue, and boom, instant inebriation, straight from the wall, like sadness on tap. But theory is generous. In practice, these taps were leaky, unfiltered, and wildly inconsistent. Some produced a delicate trickle. Others, like the one you just discovered, had the pressure of a fire hydrant and the temperature of someone else's bathtub. You're now dripping, confused, and possibly flammable. You try to dry yourself off using a decorative curtain. It smells worse than you do. A helpful man offers you a cravat from his pocket. You don't ask questions. You thank him and wring yourself out over a potted fern. The barkeeper sees what's happened and just nods. Not approvingly, not disapprovingly, just knowingly, as if this happens every Thursday, because it does. You ask him if that particular spout was meant for public use. He shrugs. Depends what you mean by public and use. Encouraging. You quickly learn that your discovery is just the tip of the nonsense iceberg. Across the palace, there are rumors of other secret taps. One hidden inside a hollow bust of Queen Victoria. One beneath a piano key that plays a single sour note when pulled. One, terrifyingly, built into a taxidermied badger. You pray never to meet it. There's even a game some patrons play called Gin Tap Roulette. The rules are simple. You push things. If gin comes out, you win. If something else comes out, well, that's the risk. One man once triggered a mechanism that released a flood of pickled onions. Another unleashed what was later confirmed to be a raccoon. Nobody knows where it came from. Nobody's asked since. You decide not to play, but others do. All night, in corners of the palace, you hear the occasional clunk, followed by gasps, cheers, or startled screams. The taps are unreliable, but the excitement is addictive. It's like Vegas for the slightly damp and historically underregulated. And of course, like all poorly maintained systems, the taps develop personalities. Some become clogged and sputter ominously. Some dispense nothing for hours, then erupt in a fountain at precisely the wrong moment. Usually when someone is proposing marriage or explaining taxes. One has been officially cursed after it flooded a billiards table mid-game and soaked an entire choir. Still, the idea of gin on demand, secret, sneaky gin, is strangely comforting. It's a testament to Victorian innovation, or at least their endless willingness to mix luxury with chaos. They didn't have indoor plumbing, but by God, they had a wall that spit booze if you poked it just right. You step away from the mirror, sticky but wiser. You'll never trust reflective surfaces again. A small child points at your soaked boots and asks if it's raining indoors. You say yes, because in a way, it's raining gin, and you've just met the storm. You've had 3 drinks, and now you're explaining time travel to a shoemaker who thinks Queen Victoria is secretly a vampire. He may be right, or you may have misunderstood everything. Either way, you both feel very clever. This is not uncommon. In fact, it's a beloved tradition in gin palaces everywhere. The moment when inebriation levels reach philosophical. Somewhere between your 2nd and 4th glass of Mother's Ruin, your brain decides it is now qualified to solve the universe. And everyone within earshot becomes an unwilling participant in a TED Talk delivered by people who have forgotten how chairs work. Tonight's symposium begins with a conversation about boots. Reasonable enough, considering your companion is a shoemaker named Clarence who insists he once cobbled for the royal stables. You nod politely. Then Clarence leans forward and says, in the most serious tone imaginable, "But what is a foot, really?" You laugh, but he doesn't. He's deadly serious. And now you're down the rabbit hole. From there, the conversation spirals gloriously out of control. One moment you're talking about feet, the next about whether time is real or just something we invented to explain how soup gets cold. A third participant appears. An elderly woman named Maud, who interjects with the phrase, "But have you considered gravity emotionally?" You try to follow. Truly. But Clarence is now drawing diagrams with a sausage on a napkin, and Maud is humming what she says is the key of destiny. Somehow, a fourth person joins. An apprentice chimney sweep with a wild look in his eye and a theory that the moon controls bread prices. He has no proof, just vibes. Your gin-soaked brain is absolutely thrilled. Everyone here is a genius. Or possibly hallucinating. But either way, this is the most intellectually stimulating conversation you've had since you once argued with a squirrel in a park about sandwich theft. And honestly, that squirrel made more sense than Clarence. As the hour creeps onward, measured only by how many times your cup is refilled, someone poses the question, if a potato could dream, what would it want to be? This sets off a passionate debate about free will, reincarnation, and whether pigeons count as government surveillance. You contribute earnestly. At one point, you suggest that perhaps humans are just ambulatory soup sacks held together by bone ambition. The others pause. Then they applaud. Maud weeps. A man nearby overhears and demands to join. He brings a plate of pickled eggs and the firm belief that the sun is powered by bees. You don't know his name, you call him Solar Dave. He accepts this with honor. There is no logic, no structure. Just booze-fueled brilliance and complete nonsense tangled together like a philosophical hairball. At some point, someone yells, "Existence is a scam," and everyone cheers. You don't even know what side of the argument you're on anymore. You're just thrilled to be part of it. The bartender walks past, raises an eyebrow, and mutters, "Ah, drunk Plato hour again," then keeps walking. By the end of it all, Clarence leans back, sighs, and says, "You know none of us are really here." You're not sure what he means, but you nod solemnly. Maud clinks your glass and whispers, "Speak your truth, King," then promptly falls asleep on a pile of cloaks. And that's the beauty of Gin Palace philosophy. It's not about answers. It's not about facts. It's about that weird, beautiful moment where strangers become scholars, sausages become diagrams, and the universe briefly makes sense until someone burps and resets the mood entirely. Tomorrow, you won't remember half of what was said. But tonight, you've solved everything, at least until last call. Your boots are sticking to the floor. You're not sure if it's gin, blood, or the collective sins of the empire. Either way, do not, under any circumstances, look under the table. Nothing good lives down there. It squelches. That's your first clue. Not a gentle squeak or the delicate whisper of damp carpet. No. This is a full-bodied squelch, the sound of something ancient and disapproving, clinging to the bottom of your shoe like it wants a word with your ancestors. Welcome to the floor of a Victorian gin palace. A masterpiece of sticky horror. From afar, the palace dazzles. Gilded columns, gaslit chandeliers, and sparkling glasswork distract the eye. But take one step forward, and your feet are introduced to the reality of the situation. A surface more treacherous than a haunted skating rink and about twice as alive. The floor is not just dirty, it is sentient. It remembers every spill, every fight, every sneeze from a man who's had one too many, and refuses to acknowledge personal hygiene. It is layered with history, and filth, and probably tapeworms. You look down, briefly, and regret it instantly. There are crumbs. There are what might once have been vegetables. There's a suspiciously perfect dent in the shape of a human forehead. You tell yourself it was from dancing. You know it wasn't. You try to lift your foot, and it resists, just for a second, like it's testing you. The message is clear. No sudden movements, and maybe you'll survive. A nearby patron drops a coin. It lands with a wet plop and immediately vanishes, consumed by the depths. "Let it go," someone says, solemnly. "It belongs to the floor now," and it does. Because nothing dropped here is ever retrieved. Hairpins, buttons, pride. It all gets absorbed. The floor is less a surface and more a sluggish creature, lying in wait, hoping you'll drop your sandwich so it can gain power. Occasionally you spot something moving under a table. You don't ask. It could be a rat. It could be a raccoon in a cravat. It could be whatever's left of poor Timothy, who slipped on a pickle 2 weeks ago and was never seen again. Some brave souls try to clean the floor. The barkeep once mopped it with gin. It hissed. Another time, a well-meaning woman used soap, and the suds turned a disturbing shade of brown and started crawling. Since then, the strategy has been to just sprinkle sawdust and hope for the best. And oh, the sawdust. It's everywhere, supposedly for hygiene. Really, it's just there to keep you from ice skating into the bar counter. It doesn't help. It clumps. It smells. And it absorbs exactly nothing. Instead, it becomes part of the terrain, forming gentle hills of debris, crunching softly underfoot like the bones of bad decisions. You spot a man dancing. Not out of joy, but because he's trying to unstick himself from a particularly treacherous section near the fireplace. He frees one foot, only to lose the other. It's like watching a drunk tap dance on flypaper. 2 people try to help. Now it's a conga line of poor choices. You resolve to stay seated. For safety. At some point, someone spills their gin. No one flinches. The floor hungrily accepts the offering. You imagine it purring. It's not just gross, it's legendary. Patrons tell stories of the Great Mop Incident of 42, the time someone fell asleep under a table and emerged weeks later with glowing eyes and a second accent. Children born nearby are warned not to touch it until they've been baptized. Dogs refuse to enter, and still the palace thrives. People drink, they dance, they laugh, all while standing on a surface that would give a health inspector a stroke. Because in the gin palace, you don't rise above the filth, you cheers over it. There's a box by the door labeled Lost Property. It contains 1 shoe, 2 canaries, a false moustache, and several molars. You don't ask questions. You simply accept this as part of the gin palace ecosystem. The sign above it reads, "Inquire within." But you suspect it should say, "Abandon all hope ye who poke." The box is wooden, poorly nailed together, and gives off the faint scent of damp velvet and broken promises. It's less of a lost and found and more of a shrine to chaos, a quiet corner where dignity goes to die, and possibly molt. You wander over, cautiously, gin in hand, boots still sticking faintly to the floor behind you like a reminder that your decisions are not reversible. A sign tacked to the box with a bent fork reads, "Last claimed, July 1843. It's currently 1860. 1. Fantastic. Inside, nestled among a frayed glove and something that might have once been a lemon, are several unidentifiable objects that make your soul itch. One appears to be a doll's leg. Another is labeled, "Not a foot," which only makes it worse. You nudge it with a spoon someone left behind and immediately regret everything. Still, curiosity wins. It always does. You dig. There's the single shoe. Not a matching pair, just one lonely scuffed boot with a mysterious stain shaped exactly like Italy. Tucked inside it is a playing card with teeth marks. Possibly human. You find a monocle. Cracked. It stares back at you accusingly. The moustache lies beneath it, which implies someone dramatically de-disguised themselves before vanishing into the fog. You hope it was for espionage reasons. You know it wasn't. And yes, molars. Several, loose in the bottom of the box like ancient dice from a particularly aggressive board game. Some are gold-tipped, some are not. All are definitely judging you. The two canaries in question are, somehow, alive. You assume they were forgotten, perhaps during an emotional performance of waltzing Matilda or a heated argument about chimney tacks. Either way, they chirp cheerfully and appear to have made peace with their situation. One of them is wearing a tiny hat. You do not question this. A woman approaches, eyes wide. "Has anyone turned in a sandwich?" she asks. You shake your head. She sighs and mumbles something about betrayal and pickles, then disappears into the gin fog. The lost property box isn't just a container. It's a museum of misadventure. A time capsule for things people meant to hold on to, but didn't. A hat that got launched during an overly enthusiastic toast. A cravat last seen wrapped around someone else's beer. A wooden spoon with the words, "Do not trust Harold" carved into it. There's even a note. "If found, do not return. I'm better off without it." No one knows what it refers to. Possibly a glove. Possibly a husband. Every object tells a story, and most of those stories end with someone waking up somewhere unfamiliar, slightly bruised, and missing a personal belonging and about 3 hours of memory. Occasionally, someone comes in and genuinely reclaims something. A man once recognized his own front tooth and retrieved it with pride. Another came looking for a family heirloom and instead left with a ladle and a wife. It's just that kind of place. You pause. You stare into the box. For a moment, you think you see your own future in there, misplaced, gently chewed, and wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. You step back, because the gin palace doesn't just take your sobriety, it takes your scarf, your self-respect, and, sometimes, your canaries. And the box is always ready. Disagreements escalate fast, but instead of punches, someone challenges another to a duel of limericks. You've never seen two grown men insult each other in verse over a spilled drink. But now, you can't look away. Victorian gin palaces are strange places, full of sharp elbows, sharper tongues, and an even sharper sense of personal drama. Tempers flare quickly. But fists? No, that would be uncivilized. This is a proper establishment, after all. Never mind the man singing to his shoes, or the gin-soaked carpet that could qualify as a biological hazard. When conflict arises, it's not resolved through violence. It's resolved through style. The Limerick duel is just one of many acceptable forms of combat here, and make no mistake, it's brutal. You watch as two well-dressed gentlemen, one wearing a cravat large enough to double as a bedsheet, step into the center of the room and begin to spar. Verbally, the first man clears his throat dramatically, slams his empty glass down, and recites, "There once was a man named McGrew, whose breath reeked of mouldy fondue. He spilled all my gin, then blamed it on wind. Now his waistcoat will smell like dog stew." Gasps. Applause. A nearby woman faints from the sheer burn of it all. McGrew, clearly wounded but not out, clutches his monocle like a dueling pistol and fires back. There once was a blowhard named Clive, who mistook a dead pigeon for chive. He's pompous and loud, like a cheese in a shroud, and I'm shocked he's still technically alive. The room erupts. Someone tosses a sausage in approval. The barkeeper sighs and rings a bell, one that appears to be used exclusively for poetry-based altercations. Another round begins. You learn quickly that this is just one of many established fighting formats. There's spoon jousting, not as dangerous as it sounds, but significantly messier. Opponents hold spoons in their mouths and charge at each other like caffeinated geese. The goal is unclear. Points may be awarded for flair, clumsiness, or dramatic injury. Then there's the stare-off, which lasts until one participant blinks or starts reciting tax policy out of nervousness. You watch two women silently lock eyes for 45 minutes. A bystander whispers, "They were once best friends." You nod, respectfully, and, of course, there's interpretive disapproval, where competitors use only body language and deeply judgmental sighs to convey disappointment. It's like being scolded by your grandmother through interpretive dance. The audience, bizarrely, rates it like Olympic diving, but the Limerick duel remains the crown jewel. These aren't casual insults. These are crafted barbs, sharpened with literary flair and marinated in gin. You overhear one man writing his insult out on a napkin, editing it 3 times, and then dramatically tearing it up because it lacked the right meter. Another scribbles in a notebook titled Burns and Zingers, Volume 3. It's not always highbrow. One participant rhymes pickle with fickle and then tries to rhyme that with kickle, an attempt so bold it earns a standing ovation despite being grammatically illegal. Sometimes, the duels are over genuine offences, stolen drinks, insulted hats, mysterious puddles. Other times, it's just tradition. It's Friday night, after all. What else is a Victorian gentleman supposed to do? Quietly reflect on mortality and syphilis? Not when there's rhyming combat to be had. You begin to see the genius of it. Fights with rules. Chaos in a tuxedo. Aggression filtered through Victorian etiquette. And just enough nonsense to keep things interesting. One man bows, recites a limerick involving sheep, betrayal, and a haunted pie, and then promptly walks into a pillar. No one blinks. That's just how things go in the Gin Palace, where conflict is inevitable, but decorum, mandatory. Some patrons have been here since sunrise, not because they're unemployed, but because, in Victorian England, gin was basically a networking tool. You close a deal, insult your boss, and land a new job all before noon. It's not unusual, it's just Tuesday. While modern offices have coffee machines and LinkedIn, Victorian professionals had gin palaces and strong stomachs. If you wanted to make things happen in business or in life, you didn't head to the boardroom, you headed to the bar. Because nothing says career progression quite like negotiating contracts while slightly cross-eyed and wearing a waistcoat you can no longer fasten. You walk in at 9 a.m. and find a scene that looks suspiciously like a business conference. If that conference were being held during a mild tornado, a man in a bowler hat is loudly discussing trade routes while attempting to butter a scone that's already been stepped on. Another gentleman is pitching a new invention, a self-pouring gravy boat, while slurring most of the vowels and drawing schematics in jam. It's chaos. But it's productive chaos. Victorian professionals, brokers, bankers, clerks, and suspiciously well-dressed chimney sweeps treated the Gin Palace as both watering hole and office. Deals were struck in back rooms. Letters of recommendation were scrawled on coasters. One man appears to be drafting a legal contract on the back of his own forearm. You overhear one woman aggressively negotiating her salary with a man who might be her brother, employer, or rival baker. Either way, she's winning. She has a drink in one hand and a ledger in the other. She's not blinking. You respect her deeply. And it's not just talk. A small, poorly lit corner has been turned into what looks like a hiring fair. A sign reads, "Hiring now." Must know math. Gin tolerance preferred. Another simply says, "Secretary needed." Left-handed. Must enjoy chaos. A third reads, "Open position. Not sure what. Just stand here." You briefly consider applying. A group of sharply dressed individuals stands in a circle, passing around a flask and exchanging business cards that appear to be printed on old playing cards. One reads, "Reginald F. Wobbleton, importer of unclear goods." Another, "Mavis G., professional problem solver and amateur witch." You're not sure if either job is legal, but they seem popular. Across the room, a small argument erupts over shipping tariffs. Instead of escalating into chaos, it's settled with a toast, a handshake, and the promise to duel politely later. This is networking, Victorian style, half diplomacy, half alcohol poisoning. The gin itself is practically currency. People pay favors with pints. Debts are settled in shots. A man trades a business lead for a saucer of pickled onions. You think you see someone bribe a local official with an extra strong cocktail and a novelty paperweight shaped like Queen Victoria. Surprisingly, some of these arrangements work. Fortunes are made here. Careers are launched. Marriages are arranged, often unintentionally. One woman lands a bookkeeping job after correctly identifying 5 types of mustard while drunk. Another is promoted after out-drinking her boss and still balancing the company's accounts on a napkin. It's capitalism, but drunk and sparkly. By mid-morning, things get truly strange. Someone brings out a briefcase. Another brings out a duck, possibly part of a merger. A toast is raised to synergy, and a man throws up into his top hat. Nobody bats an eye, because in the gin palace, work doesn't stop for sobriety. It adapts. You glance at the clock. It's not even noon, and someone's launched a startup involving bees and banking. You overhear a pitch that ends with the phrase, "And that's why I need 7 goats, a canoe, and your signature." The deal is signed. The gin palace may not have Wi-Fi. It may not have plumbing. But what it does have is Victorian hustle, fermented, chaotic, and utterly unstoppable. And apparently, it is tax-deductible. He doesn't sweep chimneys anymore. Now he just tells war stories from soot-covered memory. Every sentence ends with, "Back in my day," even when talking about dogs, milk, or the weather. You don't know his name. Nobody does. Some say it's Cecil. Others think it's just Sweep. But he's always here. Same corner, same chair, same coat that might actually be made of compressed coal dust. His skin appears to be 60% soot, 30% beard, and 10% pipe smoke. He smells like burnt toast and vague sorrow. He's not drinking gin. No, that would be too newfangled. He's sipping something that may be older than the palace itself. It lives in a chipped mug that simply reads, "Don't." You consider asking what it island. You don't. He's telling a story. He's always telling a story about the time he once got stuck in a flue and survived by gnawing on lichen and humming sea shanties until someone noticed the ceiling was making noise. You're not sure it's true. You're not sure he cares. The room listens anyway, because while no one invited him, no one's brave enough to uninvite him either. Sometimes he's coherent. Other times, he drifts mid-sentence, muttering about the great chimney collapse of 47, or a haunted teapot that whispered threats. No one knows if it's trauma or just an extraordinary commitment to ambiance. He's made the corner his home. Around him, a pile of rags, 3 spoons of questionable origin, and a taxidermied pigeon he refers to as Captain Stubbs. Occasionally, he asks the bird for input. Even more occasionally, the bird appears to answer. You're not sure if that's the gin or your own descent into madness. And oh, the monologues. You hear about the time soot turned to snow and blanketed a ballroom, about chimney spirits that steal your socks but leave your sins, about a duchess with a fondness for flue boys and a terrible sense of direction. Every tale more bizarre than the last. Every single one. Ending in, "Back in my day." You learn that back in his day, rain tasted better, boots were sturdier, and milk could fight you if disrespected. You ask what that means. He squints and replies, "Exactly." Children come by sometimes just to hear him rant. One asks, "What was it like to be a chimney sweep?" He says, "Imagine crawling into a brick throat that hated you." The child nods solemnly. The mother quietly moves them 2 tables away. Sometimes he offers unsolicited advice. Never trust a man with dry elbows. If your hat doesn't fit, you're thinking too small. Always sneeze uphill. You don't understand any of it. You write it down anyway. You start to suspect he's become some kind of gin palace cryptid. A local myth made flesh. The immortal soot spirit. He's part of the building now. If he left, the structural integrity might fail, or the floor might finally cave in and consume everyone. And yet, beneath the dirt, the raspy voice, the fact that he once tried to trade Captain Stubbs for a sausage roll, there's something oddly comforting, like an eccentric grandfather no one remembers inviting to dinner but who somehow knows everything. When a bar fight breaks out over the last pickled onion, he doesn't flinch. When the gaslight flickers ominously, he just says, "She's coming," and goes back to carving a chess piece from a lump of coal. You ask who she island, he says, "You'll know. You won't sleep tonight, but the sweep, he'll still be here tomorrow." Same chair, same cup, still talking, still ending every story with that sacred phrase. Back in my day, Victorians had a complicated relationship with children. Some palaces had side rooms where kids played with marbles while their parents drank enough gin to see God. You watch a 10-year-old beat a grown man at cards. Twice. You blink. The child is now counting a pile of coins with the cold precision of a seasoned debt collector. His opponent, a mustachioed railway clerk, looks visibly shaken. You swear the kid just told him to try again when you've learned math. Reginald. Reginald quietly walks away to reevaluate his life choices. Welcome to the most unsettling corner of the Victorian gin palace. The unofficial creche. / gambling. Den for children. Yes, really. While modern bars would sooner burst into flames than allow a toddler near a tequila sunrise, the gin palaces of 19th century England were surprisingly child-friendly, not in a wholesome way. More in a we brought little Tommy here because the soot factory wouldn't take him yet sort of way. There's a room just off the main bar, likely intended for coats or dramatic fainting, and it's full of children. Tiny boots, sticky fingers, questionable ethics. They're playing cards, spinning tops, and arguing about who gets to wear the hat made of goose feathers. One girl is selling lemonade for tuppence a cup, but you're almost certain it's just diluted gin and boldness. You see one boy attempting to climb a chandelier. He pauses halfway, yells, "I am the king now," and resumes his ascent. No one stops him. A nearby adult glances up, shrugs, and goes back to monologuing about his unsuccessful eel farm. Some of the children are clearly here against their will. Others look like they run the place. One girl has a clipboard. Another appears to be managing the bets on whether the chimney sweep will fall asleep mid-sentence again. He will. The bar staff mostly ignore them unless a small fire breaks out. Then someone tosses a damp rag into the room and shouts, "Play nice." Problem solved. And somehow, despite all of this, they're thriving. Gin Palace kids are fast, ruthless, and oddly philosophical. One 6-year-old explains compound interest to a grocer. Another offers to sell you a map of secret toilet locations, half of which may or may not lead to an alley filled with angry ducks. You witness a solemn game of marbles interrupted when one boy flips the table and challenges everyone to a duel in hopscotch. The others accept without hesitation. It ends in tears, triumph, and one dislocated knee. These children aren't just passively observing the debauchery. They're participating. Some carry trays. Some swipe coins. One acts as a lookout, occasionally yelling, "Act sober! Constable's coming!" like a tiny town crier with trust issues. And of course, there's the child philosopher. Every gin palace seems to have one. A small, eerily calm child who sits alone in the corner, quietly narrating the downfall of empires with a lollipop in one hand and an existential crisis in the other. Tonight's prophet is named Elsie. She informs you that happiness is a brief dream between Monday and death, and then offers you a gumdrop. You take it, out of fear. Still, it's not all gloom. The kids laugh. They build precarious towers out of bread crusts. They invent songs that make no sense but involve impressive stomping. They form unlikely friendships, brief alliances, and highly illegal lemonade cartels. It's weird, It's rowdy. It's kind of magical. Because in the strange, sticky, chandelier-lit world of Victorian gin palaces, childhood didn't wait for ideal conditions. It just happened, loudly. With marbles, scams, and occasional goat races. And somehow, these kids came out tougher, wiser, and significantly better at poker than most adults. Terrifying, but impressive. You overhear a man claiming he's met Prince Albert. He has not. He once saw a painting of him in a pawn shop. But in a gin palace, lies are the social currency, and he's absolutely loaded. He's wearing a cravat so large it has its own gravitational pull and holding court at a round table like a slightly unhinged royal. Around him, a small but growing crowd listens with rapt attention as he recounts a completely fabricated encounter with the Queen's corgi. You're pretty sure Queen Victoria didn't even own a corgi. Doesn't matter. He says it bit him on the ankle, and now he limps nobly. This is the unwritten rule of the gin palace. If you can't be rich, be convincing. Victorian England was a place obsessed with class, titles, and where your grandfather bought his potatoes. But the gin palace was one of the rare spaces where reality could be blurred into something more fabulous. Gin-fueled storytelling became a sort of performance art. And everyone was in on it. Here, a coal hauler becomes an import-export specialist in combustion technologies. A laundress is personal stylist to the Duchess of Kent. A chimney sweep, air circulation consultant. If someone raises an eyebrow, you simply take a long sip of your gin, squint, and say, "It's complicated. It's not lying. It's aspirational roleplay." Some folks take it to new heights. A man named Percy is currently passing out calling cards that read, "Lord of East Bognor, unofficial." Another has sewn extra buttons on his coat to give the illusion of authority. One woman shows up every Friday wearing a tiara she claims is on loan from the royal collection. You saw her buy it from a child selling marzipan crowns last week. The gin palace rewards this kind of nonsense. The drunker the crowd, the more applause you get for your tall tales. Claim you're related to Napoleon? You'll get a free drink. Insist you once taught Charles Dickens how to waltz. You might get a seat upgrade and a round of polite gasps. And for those who can't spin stories, there are accessories. Fake medals. Overly decorative walking sticks. Pocket watches that don't work but tick just enough to impress. A man walks by in a cape made of what appears to be repurposed upholstery. He bows deeply and says he's an ambassador to somewhere called Greater Weaselshire. You nod respectfully. You've heard good things. Sometimes, these characters climb the actual social ladder. Not far, but high enough to impress someone else at the bar. A butcher becomes a meat broker to the gentry. A woman with a knack for eavesdropping reinvents herself as a confidential consultant in delicate matters. She gets hired, possibly by someone who regrets it. You even overhear a recruitment pitch. "We're assembling a gentleman's club," a man says. "Members must own at least one velvet item and a firm handshake." A crowd gathers. A man offers his ferret as a reference. He's accepted. It's intoxicating. And not just because of the gin. It's the thrill of being seen, admired, believed. Even if only for a night. Even if you have to pretend your name is Archibald Featherington Biscuits III and your family crest features a spoon and an aggressively angry goose. You try it yourself. You tell a nearby stranger you're an architectural consultant for erratic structures. They ask if that means chimneys. You say, "Exactly." They nod, impressed. You are now officially somebody, because in the gin palace, truth is optional, but swagger, mandatory. He's 6 feet 7 inches, built like a brick wall, and says "sir" before throwing you into the street. You admire his professionalism as you fly through the air and land in a cabbage cart. You should not have insulted the taxidermy. His name? No one's entirely sure. Some say it's Crimp. Others whisper Mr. Togsby. One woman insists he's a retired opera singer named Bernard, but all agree. He is the law, with a side of impeccable manners and a jawline that could split timber. You first notice him standing by the entrance like a carved statue, if that statue had forearms the size of fireplace logs and a top hat that could comfortably host a family of squirrels. He doesn't move much. He doesn't need to. His presence alone seems to suppress petty theft and excessive hiccuping. And yet, somehow, he's gentle, not physically. He could throw you across 2 boroughs and still have time to adjust his cufflinks. But his tone is the auditory equivalent of warm slippers and an unexpected inheritance. He addresses patrons as Madam and Sir, even as he physically rotates them toward the door like misbehaving mannequins. One man loudly complains about being removed mid-anecdote. Crimp responds, "Indeed, sir," and a thrilling tale it was. But your use of the phrase "crispy marmalade thighs" violated our sensory offense ordinance. The man nods solemnly and walks off into the fog. He is efficiency personified. He doesn't argue. He doesn't lecture. He informs, calmly, firmly, as if bouncing people from Victorian gin palaces is simply part of the natural order, like gravity or goose-based revenge. You witness him stop a brawl with just one look. 2 rival poets, both armed with feathered quills and excessive vowels, freeze mid-insult. You sallow sonnet sniffer, you limping Limerick lout. Crimp raises a single eyebrow. Silence. One of them begins sweeping the floor in apology. And yet, Crimp is never cruel. He allows second chances. He patiently removes hats from chandeliers. He even carries out sleeping patrons, bridal style, when they've tried to climb into the punch bowl for a quick swim through flavor. You once saw him tuck a drunk accountant under a coat rack and whisper, "Nap it off, sir." The world can wait. Of course, there are limits. You learn this the hard way after attempting to pet a mounted badger near the bar, a creature known affectionately as Sir Scruffles. It's not even real, but apparently it's off limits. The moment your hand makes contact with the dusty fur, Crimp appears, instantly, as if summoned by a spiritual disturbance in the taxidermy field. "Sir," he says gently, "I must ask you not to fraternize with the wildlife. Step outside with dignity or without it. Your choice. You pick dignity. He picks velocity. The cabbage cart picks you. You return 30 minutes later, bruised, humbled, smelling faintly of vinegar and Victorian soil. Crimp nods in acknowledgement, as if to say, "Lesson learned. Welcome back." Rumors about his past swirl like pipe smoke. Some say he once escorted a pickpocket all the way to Wales, on foot. Others claim he stopped a robbery, using only a scowl and a lukewarm biscuit. One bartender insists Crimp used to wrestle bears in the East End. The bears reportedly retired. At closing time, he becomes softer. Still watchful, but almost wistful. You see him tidy a fallen chair, straighten a crooked painting of Queen Victoria, who seems to wink in approval, and place a fresh candle beside the taxidermy badger, who, again, is not for petting. Because in this palace of sticky floors, fake barons, and chaotic energy, Mr. Crimp is the final authority. Not by violence, but by presence, by principles, by the sheer force of quiet, formidable dignity. And if you ever cross the line, he'll throw you out, yes, but he'll say thank you while doing it. There's technically a closing time, but no one follows it. The bartender just starts sweeping around you while whistling ominously. You consider sleeping under a bar stool, but the floor might be sentient. It's late, or early, or both. The gaslights are flickering like they've seen too much. The crowd has thinned, but the chaos, still thriving. A man in the corner is quietly debating his coat. A woman is waltzing solo with a chair she's named Gregory. Somewhere behind you, someone is whispering to a bucket. The gin palace doesn't shut down, it just slows. Like an old dog turning in a circle before it lies down and accidentally sets the rug on fire. Legally, the place should have closed an hour ago. But this is Victorian London, where legally is more of a suggestion. And time is just what you guess, based on how many buttons have fallen off your coat. The bartender, still the same one from 6 hours ago, begins a ritual you've come to recognize. He doesn't announce last call. That would be too modern. Instead, he picks up a broom that looks more decorative than functional and begins sweeping aggressively around people's feet. Like a passive-aggressive ghost, he hums, loudly, off-key. The song doesn't exist outside his mind. You suspect it's called something like Get Out or Face the Bucket. You ask if it's closing time. He replies, yes. You ask if the bar's actually closing. He replies, no. It's a system built on vibes, not structure. The few remaining patrons have entered a sort of purgatory. They're no longer drinking with purpose. They're just existing. One man is asleep with his face in a plate of ham. Another is staring into the mirror behind the bar like he's expecting it to offer life advice. You catch your own reflection. It doesn't blink. You look away. The chandeliers begin to dim, either intentionally or because someone's finally stopped cranking the gas. A candle sputters. A man gasps like he's watching opera. The atmosphere has shifted from rowdy to surreal. There's a low, murmuring conversation about where people might go next. One suggests another gin palace down the road. Another proposes a spontaneous poetry reading in the gutter. A third wants to start a fire for warmth and interpretive storytelling. No one has the energy to disagree. Meanwhile, the bartender has started stacking stools upside down on tables with the slow determination of someone who has done this 10,000 times and seen things no man should see. He makes eye contact with you. It says, "You have 5 minutes before I start hosing the floor." You glance at the floor. It ripples. You reconsider sleeping under a bar stool. Some patrons do fall asleep. Not gracefully. One simply tips over in their chair and chooses to remain horizontal. Another crawls under a bench and mutters about sausages. No one stops them. It's understood. If you don't leave the gin palace eventually, the gin palace leaves you. Crimp, the bouncer, appears, just appears. He doesn't walk so much as manifest. He starts gently tapping people with a rolled-up newspaper labeled encouragement stick. One by one, they shuffle toward the exit. One man tries to bribe him with a drawing of a horse. Crimp nods, pockets the sketch, and carries him out like a Victorian baby. Eventually, it's just you, the bartender, Crimp, and Sir Scruffles, the taxidermy badger. The bartender lights a final candle. Crimp begins humming. You realize this is your signal. You stand up, salute the furniture for some reason, and make your way toward the door. Outside, it's still foggy, still damp, still London. You survived. But don't worry. The Gin Palace will still be here tomorrow night, and it still won't technically close. Outside, it's foggy, damp, and full of horse poop. You stagger down cobblestones, holding your shoes like trophies. A stray dog follows you for 7 blocks. You name him Gin. The night air hits your face like a moist slap from a disappointed relative. Cold, wet, and unrelenting. Your breath forms little clouds in the gaslight. And your coat, once a proud woolen fortress, is now more sponge than garment. One sleeve is missing. You don't remember why. You try to walk in a straight line. Victorian cobblestones laugh at your ambition. Each one seems individually designed to trip you. Your socks are soaked, your hat is gone, possibly bartered for a sausage roll, and your dignity is trailing behind you like a child's lost kite. But you've made a new friend. Gin, the dog, is a wiry little thing with one ear permanently tilted and the attitude of a bar bouncer in training. He doesn't bark. He just trots alongside you like a furry life coach, occasionally sniffing lampposts and judging your posture. You pause at a puddle that may be a puddle or the beginning of the Thames. A passing man tips his hat and offers you a boiled sweet. You thank him, forget what it is, and put it in your pocket for later. Later never comes. The streets are quiet now. Too quiet. Victorian quiet. Which means somewhere nearby, someone is either being serenaded by a drunken fiddle player or attempting to joust with a lamppost. You pass a closed bakery. The smell of yesterday's bread still clings to the windows. You lick the glass. Gin pretends not to know you. You consider your life choices. You recall the moment, hours ago, when you confidently declared gin to be the drink of poets and revolutionaries. You now feel like neither. You feel like a damp cravat in human form. The gas lamps glow dimly, casting your elongated shadow onto brick walls. You wave at your shadow. It waves back, mockingly. You consider starting an argument, but realize you'd probably lose. A gentle drizzle begins, because of course it does. You hold your shoes tighter, as if they're medals from a noble war. Your feet are numb, your ears ringing with the ghost of a banjo, and your hands smell faintly of pickles and spilled hope. You pass a cat sitting on a windowsill. It blinks at you with imperial disdain. You bow slightly. It does not bow back. Gin sniffs a boot lying in the gutter and looks at you as if to ask, "Yours?" You shake your head. He shrugs and moves on. You admire his ability to let things go. A carriage rattles by, pulled by a horse with the emotional energy of someone who's done this for too long and seen too much. Inside, a couple argues softly about umbrellas. You envy their warmth and their roof. Eventually, you reach home. Well, you reach a home. You stare at the door for a full minute, trying to decide if it's yours. It looks vaguely familiar. There's a welcome mat. You test the knob. It's locked. You knock. The door opens, revealing a woman in a hairnet holding a rolling pin. She does not look impressed. "This isn't your house," she says. You apologize, tip your imaginary hat, and back away into the fog like a confused magician. 5 doors down, you finally find the right one, or close enough. You crawl inside, Gin following behind like a very tolerant guardian angel. You collapse onto a straw mattress that smells like cabbage and old pennies. You don't care. You've made it, and you still have your shoes. Victory. You wake up the next day with a headache, a spoon in your pocket, and vague memories of joining a barbershop quartet. You're not sure if it was real, but there's glitter on your coat and a half-written sonnet in your handwriting. Your head feels like it was used as a practice drum by a marching band of tap-dancing squirrels. Your mouth tastes like someone stirred vinegar with a chimney brush. You open one eye. Light attacks. You shut it again and hiss like a Victorian vampire. Which, come to think of it, you might have claimed to be around drink number 7. You lie still, take inventory. 1 shoe, missing. Pants, buttoned but in a way that suggests haste and possible panic. Your shirt smells like pine, smoke, and despair. There's a crumpled piece of paper in your hand that reads, "I hereby challenge you to a pudding duel." You don't know who wrote it, but it's in your handwriting. Your honor may or may not be at stake. You try to sit up. Bad idea. Your spine audibly objects. There's a bruise on your elbow shaped like Australia, another on your hip that seems to be spelling out the word "why." You scan the room. It is technically your room. The bed is vaguely yours. The chamber pot appears unused. A win. And there's a dog curled at your feet. "Oh, right, Gin." He raises his head, gives you a look that says, "I told you not to try the flaming pickle shot," then goes back to sleep. You hobble to the mirror. Your face looks like it went out partying without the rest of you. Hair askew, one eyebrow singed. Glitter near your ear in the shape of a small crown. You whisper, "What happened?" And the mirror just fogs up judgmentally. The memories return in flashes. A toast to Queen Victoria, On a table, a duel over the pronunciation of treacle. Someone singing God Save the Queen in falsetto while doing handstands. It may have been you. There's a receipt in your pocket for 6 gins, a plate of mystery meat triangles, and something simply labelled emotional damages, 3p. You feel vaguely proud. You stagger to the kitchen, if it can be called that. It consists of a stove, a jug of water that tastes like it's been filtered through old rope, and half a loaf of bread that may now qualify as a blunt weapon. You gnaw at it anyway. It is dry. It is vengeful. You glance at the window. Fog. Always fog. London looks like it's hungover too. Somewhere outside, a man sings off-key about sausages. You flinch. Your headache flinches harder. You find your other shoe in the fireplace. There's no explanation. And honestly, you don't want one. On the table is a note that reads, "We need to talk about the ferret." No signature. Just that. You stare at it, long and hard, then tuck it into your pocket for later, like it's a riddle from the universe. Eventually, you collapse back into your chair and let the grogginess hold you like a disappointed aunt. You survived. Your dignity? Shaky. Your memories? Fragmented. Your wallet? Gone. But in its place is a calling card that says, "You were delightful. Let's do it again." The Baron. You don't know which Baron. You hope it's not the one who tried to sell you a monocle made of toffee. You scratch Jin behind the ears. He burps. You nod solemnly. Tonight, maybe you'll stay in. Maybe you'll read a book. Maybe you'll finally clean the glitter off your coat. But probably, you'll be back. Because the Gin Palace always calls again, and next time you'll bring a helmet. You ask for another gin, but the taste hits your tongue like a chemical accident in a candle factory. That's because it was a chemical accident. Some gins were made with turpentine, sulfuric acid, or things last seen in an alchemist's outhouse. Congratulations, you're now drunk, flammable, and slightly lemon-scented. You stare down at your glass like it just personally insulted your family. It smells like pine needles, nail polish remover, and whatever they use to clean cannon barrels. You take another sip, not because it's good, but because your tongue has already gone numb, and you want to see what happens next. Victorian gin, also known as Mother's Ruin, was a complex potion of regret and risk. There were no regulations, no quality control, no guarantees that what you ordered bore any chemical resemblance to what you drank last time. It might have been gin. It might have been window cleaner. It might have been both. Simultaneously, one recipe included juniper berries, ethanol, and mystery spirit drawn from pipe residue. Another popular blend was said to contain turpentine, which, fun fact, is technically flammable and definitely not a recommended beverage. But hey, it gives the gin a pine-fresh flavor and the drinker the ability to smell colors. You overhear the barkeep tell someone that their batch was aged for a full 3 hours in a tin bucket near a radiator. It's artisanal. It's terrifying. It burns going down, and also, when it comes back up, back then, you didn't buy gin for the taste. You bought it for the speed. Gin was the Uber of intoxication. Cheap, fast, and occasionally unsafe at any volume. It could get you from mild anxiety to dancing with ghosts in under 6 minutes. Of course, the deception didn't stop with the ingredients. Some palaces served knockoff gin, labelled with charming names like Queen's Delight, Hearthfire No. 6, or Spirit of the Empire, none of which were actually gin. One contained kerosene, one smelled faintly of clams, and the last one caused hallucinations of Queen Victoria doing backflips, which oddly made it a bestseller. There were no health inspectors. The only testing was whether or not you passed out before the second round. If you didn't go blind, it was considered a quality pour. You remember hearing about a man who made gin in his bathtub using garden herbs, leftover shoe polish, and something he only called the enhancer. He sold it in reused perfume bottles. People drank it on purpose, and if you did get sick, well, tough luck. Some claimed gin cured everything from gout to heartbreak. Others woke up with a rash that spelled out Latin verbs. The medical community remained silent, probably because they were drinking it too. But somehow, you keep sipping. Why? Because it works. It blurs the edges. It makes the gaslights shimmer a little brighter, and the man singing sea shanties sound a little less like a wounded walrus. Also, because it's Victorian London, and the other beverage options are tepid water, lukewarm milk, or tea brewed in a kettle that once housed a small lizard. By the time you've finished your drink, your tongue is coated in something waxy, your cheeks are flushed, and your eyebrows feel slightly more flammable than before. You've achieved the Victorian equivalent of inner peace, total disorientation. You consider ordering another. The bartender shrugs, wipes the counter with a rag that's probably older than you, and pours a new glass from a jug labeled definitely gin. You toast the ceiling, whisper a prayer to your liver, and take a sip. This one tastes citrusy. It also tingles. You're not sure if that's good, but it's too late now. Welcome to the golden age of gin. May your drink be potent, your eyesight optional, and your memories hazy enough to survive the morning. Cheers. The man across the bar just tipped his hat at you, winked with both eyes, and collapsed into a potted fern. That, apparently, was flirting. Courtship in a gin palace is a delicate dance of slurred poetry, stained gloves, and the occasional offer to buy you a potato. It's complicated. Victorian flirting didn't have dating apps or emojis. Instead, it had fans, hats, and highly interpretive coughing. Everything was coded. A dropped handkerchief meant, I like you. A deliberately dropped pork pie meant, I love you. Accidentally sneezing into someone's gin? That's a marriage proposal. You quickly learn that gin palace courtship operates in its own universe. A man might approach you with all the grace of a toppling bookshelf, bow deeply, and quote Shakespeare badly. Something about stars, your eyes, and cheese? You're not sure. You nod politely and sidestep behind a pillar. Moments later, a woman in a velvet cape slinks past and whispers, "Tell no one I was here," then slides you a note with nothing on it but a drawing of a turnip and the word soon. You don't know if you've been propositioned or recruited into a cult. Across the room, someone tries to impress a companion by balancing a gin bottle on their head while reciting a dirty limerick. The bottle falls. So does the limerick. You applaud out of pity, and he takes it as encouragement. You will never be free again. Flirting here isn't about subtlety. It's about commitment. The man who just offered you his sock as a token of affection meant it. The woman who complimented your teeth, then tried to lick one, also serious. Accessories become weapons of romance. A feathered hat twirl, scandalous. A glove removed slowly and slapped gently on the table. You're halfway to elopement. A cravat tied in a heart shape. You might be engaged already. The conversations are half flirt, half puzzle. You remind me of my fourth cousin. Is that a compliment? I haven't decided. Even compliments are riddles. Your hair shines like coal dust in the gaslight, one admirer coos. You smell like victory and shoe polish, another offers. Victorian flattery is specific. Gin doesn't help. It accelerates everything. Slurs become syllables. Syllables become sonnets. One woman belts out a love ballad to the barkeeper, only to finish by vomiting into her handbag. He thanks her and offers her a napkin. Victorian chivalry in action. Then there's the gift-giving. Flowers are rare. Instead, you're handed items of dubious meaning. A beetroot, a pocket watch that doesn't tick, a bottle cap with someone's initials scratched in. One hopeful suitor presses a small potato into your hand and says, "This reminded me of your face." You take it as a compliment, mostly because he's weeping with sincerity. The rules of engagement are unclear but sacred. Rule 1. Never mock a heartfelt compliment, even if it's whispered from beneath a table. Rule 2. If someone challenges your admirer to a duel of haiku, you must choose the topic. Rule 3. If someone plays the accordion to express their love, you must endure it. That's the law. Some couples hit it off immediately, trading gin-soaked secrets, dancing in wobbly circles, and deciding to run off together by dawn. Others drift apart by the second drink, usually when someone accidentally proposes to the wrong person or confesses undying love to a coat rack. Eventually, you retreat to your corner, holding your potato and your dignity in equal measure. Someone tries to wink at you again, this time with both eyes and one knee. You nod. You're learning. In the gin palace, love isn't found. It's survived. Someone just shouted about taxes, and now a group of inebriated bakers is passionately debating the corn laws while standing on bar stools. No one fully understands what they're arguing about, but it involves tariffs, bread, and possibly a duel at sunrise. You nod respectfully and sip your gin. In Victorian gin palaces, politics is less of a discussion and more of a group hallucination. One moment you're peacefully gnawing on a stale pork scratching. The next, a man in suspenders is waving a shoe in the air and demanding to be heard on the matter of grain imports. You don't know his name. No one does. He simply appears when there's a whiff of economic unrest and the scent of juniper. The topic tonight? The corn laws, which, despite their name, are not about corn, or laws, or anything anyone in the palace actually understands. But that doesn't stop them. Bakers take center stage, literally, by climbing furniture. One yells that cheap grain imports will destroy local baking traditions. Another counters that the price of bread is already high enough to be considered a luxury good. A third simply weeps into his apron, muttering about scones. Soon, others chime in. A man with no shoes but 5 opinions declares that Parliament is run by lizards. A woman in a feathered hat insists she once wrote to Lord Melbourne and received a reply that simply read, "Stop." The bartender watches, unbothered, polishing a glass with the same rag he's used since the Crimean War. You try to keep up. Words like mercantilism, land-owning elites, and economic stability float through the gin-scented air like confused pigeons. A man named Cyril accuses the wallpaper of being a Tory. Someone throws a crumpet. The crumpet is caught, buttered, and returned. A moment of peace. Then, a radical suggests universal suffrage. Half the room cheers. The other half tries to remember what suffrage means. One man loudly declares it's a kind of soup and demands it be served immediately. You do not correct him. He's holding a fork like it's evidence. In the far corner, an amateur philosopher stands on a chair and proposes abolishing the monarchy. His argument is cut short by a stern, elderly woman who throws a spoon at him and yells, "God save the Queen, you absolute turnip." Applause erupts. Someone throws a bonnet. It's unclear if this is approval or just unrelated enthusiasm. The entire atmosphere becomes part town hall, part fever dream. A chalkboard appears. No one brought it. It just exists now. A man begins drawing diagrams explaining tariffs using carrots and angry stick figures. You pretend to understand and nod sagely. The dog next to you also nods. Eventually, someone tries to bring it all back to the economy by shouting, "What about the cost of gin?" Silence. This is serious. Everyone agrees. Gin should be free, abundant, and possibly piped directly into homes. A motion is passed. No one writes it down. But it's law now. Probably. The debate fizzles out as arguments lose steam, and the effects of 4 pints of turpentine-adjacent gin begin to settle in. People collapse gently into chairs, resume half-finished songs, and order another round. A man solemnly shakes your hand and thanks you for defending the empire's marmalade policies. You did no such thing, but you accept the praise. The bakers descend from their stools, exhausted but proud. The political crisis is over. For now, You sip the last of your gin, heart full, ears ringing, and brain filled with just enough policy confusion to last you a lifetime. And as someone begins drunkenly humming Rule Britannia into a teacup, you lean back and think, that was surprisingly educational. And deeply, deeply unhelpful. Perfect. You hang up your coat on the ornate brass rack near the door. 3 hours later, it's gone, and in its place is a fur muff, a cravat, and a child's wooden hobby horse. No one knows how or why. The coat rack simply takes what it wants. At first glance, it looks like a normal coat rack. Polished brass, spiral hooks, perhaps even a faint floral motif. Harmless. Decorative. But the regulars know better. The coat rack has a reputation. A long one. Dark whispers swirl through the palace. Never leave both gloves on the hook. It prefers wool. It once devoured a bishop's umbrella. Some say the coat rack is cursed. Others say it's just unusually committed to abstract barter. You leave something on it, and it gives you back something else. Not better, not worse, just different. Once, a man left a top hat and came back to find a taxidermied squirrel in its place. The squirrel had a monocle. No one questioned it. You're not sure if the coat rack is enchanted, sentient, or just run by an extremely confused cloakroom attendant who operates entirely on vibes and mild malice. You ask the barkeep. He just chuckles, pours another gin, and mutters something about the reckoning of 1842. You do not press him. Later in the evening, you return to check on your coat. It's still gone. But now, there's a single boot filled with pickled onions and a wig styled in what could only be described as chaotic duchess. You blink twice. The coat rack blinks back. Figuratively, a woman approaches. She's holding a small cage with a live parrot that wasn't hers when she arrived. Coat rack? You ask. She nods solemnly. I gave it a bonnet. Another man claims he once left his walking stick and came back to find a fully written pamphlet on chimney tax reform. It wasn't in his handwriting, nor was it in English. Some believe the coat rack is a portal, a conduit between this world and one where fashion is sentient and very, very bored. Others think it's simply a coat rack with ambitions. Either way, people continue to use it. Because hanging your belongings somewhere feels civilized. Even when you're in a bar where someone is arm wrestling a goose, you consider retrieving what's now yours. The muff is soft. The cravat is monogrammed B. C. The hobby horse has a face that knows too much. You hesitate. Instead, you hang a second item. Your gloves. You do this as a test. A peace offering. A small sacrifice to the chaotic spirits of the cloakroom. You turn away, order another gin, and when you turn back, the gloves are gone. In their place, a small note that reads, "You're welcome, it is unsigned." The barkeeper sees you staring and grins. "First time?" he asks. You nod, slowly. He pours you a drink on the house. "You'll learn," he says, as the night unfolds. You begin to understand. The coat rack isn't just furniture. It's a character, a presence, a participant in the Gin Palace's strange, swirling ecosystem of chaos, charm, and casual theft. By the time you leave, your coat is still missing, but in your arms is a silk shawl, an antique spoon, and a small framed portrait of a man you don't recognize, but who seems vaguely trustworthy. You do not resist, because the coat rack giveth, and the coat rack taketh away. And honestly, you're not entirely sure you didn't get the better deal. A woman stands on a table and begins reciting scripture in a dramatic whisper. A man beside her weeps openly into his pork pie. For 5 minutes, the Gin Palace becomes a deeply confused, deeply intoxicated religious revival. Then someone yells, "Free gin!" and the spell is broken. It starts slowly, as these things always do. 1 minute she's sipping gin and humming Greensleeves. The next, she's got both arms raised to the heavens and is delivering a passage from the Book of Revelation, like she's auditioning for the role of slightly tipsy prophet one. The room falls quiet. Not out of reverence, exactly, but out of confusion. A man mid-sneeze stops halfway. A woman about to throw a sausage roll pauses mid-launch. Even the bar dog, Jinn, lifts his head in vague spiritual curiosity. She speaks of fire and redemption. She quotes Corinthians. She compares the journey of the soul to a bar tab that can never be fully paid. It's moving. It's dramatic. It's also happening directly above the snuff boxes and half-eaten pickled eggs. A man next to you falls to his knees, not because of religious fervor, but because his shoelaces are tied together and he's had 7 gins. Still, his posture is excellent, and it adds ambiance. A second woman begins humming a hymn, off-key, in Latin, probably. The bartender squints from behind the counter and briefly considers intervening, but then shrugs and keeps wiping the same suspicious stain off the bar. This is not the strangest thing to happen on a Tuesday. Soon more join in. There is call and response, a spontaneous attempt at a sermon on the virtues of moderation, ironic, and a man who raises his pint skyward and declares, "Let there be gin." For a fleeting, glorious moment, the gin palace feels like a temple, a cathedral with chandeliers instead of stained glass, spirits instead of sacraments, and pews that smell vaguely of damp velvet and spilled citrus. The weeping man finishes his pork pie, sobs again, and declares that he has seen the light. That light is actually just the gas fixture flickering ominously above the mirror, but the sentiment holds. You look around. People are holding hands. A chimney sweep is trying to baptize a stray cat in someone's unfinished gin. The room hums with chaotic devotion. You are, against all reason, feeling something. Not sure what. Possibly indigestion, possibly transcendence. Then it happens. A voice from the corner shouts, "Free gin!" And just like that, the spiritual fog lifts. The crowd parts like the Red Sea. Someone knocks over a chair. The woman with the scripture slips off the table and lands in someone's lap, still quoting Isaiah as she goes down. The cat escapes the baptism. The bartender sighs and starts pouring again. Order, if you can call it that, returns. A man near you mutters, "That was intense," and takes a sip of his drink. Haven't felt that close to the divine since I sneezed during a solar eclipse. The moment has passed, but the echo lingers. There's a faint hush, like the walls are still vibrating with spiritual confusion and gin vapor. You glance over at the woman now calmly eating pickled onions like nothing happened. She gives you a wink and says, "Repent, darling, and maybe have some toast." You nod. Because honestly, you're not sure if you've just had a religious awakening or a mild neurological event. Either way, you need another drink, and maybe a hymn book, just in case it happens again. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a soft, warm bed with central heating, indoor plumbing, and not a single puddle of gin underfoot, take a moment to whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors. They survived the age of gin palaces, where chandeliers hung above mud-caked boots, where corsets compressed ribs and dreams simultaneously, and where the answer to every problem was another round. They waded through sticky floors, mysterious liquids, flaming drinks, philosophical chimney sweeps, and bar snacks that could chip a tooth, and somehow they endured. Sure, it was chaotic. Sure, it was loud. And sure, some of them may have accidentally married someone during a Limerick duel. But they were resilient. They were absurd. And most importantly, they were committed to a good time, even if the gin was flavored mostly with solvents. So the next time life feels messy, or uncertain, or just a little too loud, remember that once upon a time, people found joy in gold-painted chaos, toasted their sorrows with cheap spirits, and danced beside strangers to songs that may have just been aggressive mumbling. History may be confusing, it may be sticky, and flammable and frequently full of lies. But it's also proof that people are stubborn, hopeful, and just ridiculous enough to keep going. So breathe deeply. Let the past fade into a soft blur of foggy streets and distant laughter. Sink into your blankets like they're velvet drapes in a private booth. And drift off knowing you survived something even tougher than Victorian gin. You survived Monday. Good night.